What's going on, everyone? Welcome back to another episode of Bridging the Gap here on the Jersey First TV network. As always, I'm AJ Malillo,
And I'm Stephen Rombolo.
and we are here to break down the midterm elections. As I'm sure you've gotten plenty of breakdowns before, but you haven't gotten them from us, so you'll get to hear our takes on the 2022 midterms. And I think the most clear thing to say is that this was not the red wave as predicted. It was not even so much as a red, I don't know, rainstorm. I'd say that it was probably like a red puddle, if anything, because the
If that.
Republicans, yeah, do wind up taking the House. And there's still an outside chance, I'd say, that they get 51 seats in the Senate. I mean, Steve, you were talking about the pollsters saying that the Republicans would get 54 seats, maybe 54 seats in the Senate, maybe like
hmm
30 seat advantage in the House, and they're going to squeak by with like a 10 seat advantage in the House. And maybe if they're lucky, get 51 seats in the Senate.
See, I think you're being generous when you called it a red puddle. To me, it's more like somebody got out of the car and spilled a little bit of their water bottle on the floor, and
They got a little
that's
ketchup stain on their tie.
yeah, that's what it is.
I
That's
mean,
because it is such a underwhelming performance on behalf of the Republicans, and I mean, you won't hear me complain about that.
yeah, no, completely underwhelming. I mean, I'm not going to go as far as saying like the Democrats had a good night by any stretch of the imagination.
No,
I think if you look at the numbers, it's not about people voting because they really believe in the Democrats. It's because or that they necessarily don't believe in Republicans. This is an election that is based off of candidate quality. I think that
you
is
think?
like the clearest trend that you see. And the reason I go there is because if you look at the ballot splitting across the board, right? I'll just list some of the biggest states that you notice the ballot splitting in. In Georgia, Brian Kemp got 100,000 more votes and easily beat Stacey Abrams than Herschel Walker, who's going in a runoff against Raphael Warnock. In Pennsylvania, Dr. Oz, who really wasn't a good candidate, had 200,000 more votes than Mastriano, who was running for governor in Pennsylvania, who got blown out by Shapiro. And Mastriano was basically, he literally went to the Capitol and was in the videos on January 6th, right? In Ohio, DeWine won the governor's race. He had 400,000 more votes than JD Vance. Now, JD Vance still won that Senate seat in Ohio, but it was far too close for comfort, especially in a state that's been trending red since like 2016. In Arizona, Kerry Lake, who is a Trumpish Republican, still had 50,000 more votes than Blake Masters, who really tied himself a lot more to Donald Trump than Kerry Lake did. Sununu, who's the New Hampshire governor, had a 70,000 in a very small state. Remember that 70,000 more votes than Bolduc, who was the Senate candidate that was very much tied to Trump, and the Democrats basically handpicked to run against. Um, and so if you look at the places where the Republicans put up, good candidates, you look at completely different numbers. Florida, okay?
I was gonna say that to me is where, if as we get into our analysis, I think Florida is where we have to start everything. I think everything about this midterm begins and ends in Florida.
Well, yeah, if you look at Florida, right, it came at early again. And I've been singing the praises of how Florida does their elections for I don't know how long because they count their mail in votes. Get this. They count their mail in votes starting on election day. So you have an answer of all of the mail in votes, provided they came in before election day, before the polls close. Like, oh, that's crazy. So then you have all of the votes that are getting counted after the polls all close, and you'll have an answer by like 9 o'clock at night. That's wild how that works out. But anyway, um, so in Florida, Ron DeSantis clearly not only won, not only won, he won by almost
20
20%,
points. Yeah.
right? Flipping the what was known as the quintessential swing state, into a solid red state. He won the Latino vote. He made major wins in the black vote. He won most of the woman vote. He won almost all of the independent vote. Okay, he on riding his coattails, Marco Rubio won a landslide election, and the Florida House of Representatives picked up, I think, 3 seats for Republicans, all on DeSantis's coattails, right? When you put up a quality candidate and then your other candidates aren't just completely linked to Donald Trump, the Republicans, you want to talk about a red tsunami, like Florida's underwater of red because of quality candidates that didn't tie themselves directly to Donald Trump. Every candidate that literally attached themselves at the hip to Donald Trump underperformed and or lost.
Yep.
And everyone that separated themselves won big. Ron DeSantis, Brian Kemp, Mike DeWine, the Senate candidate in Nevada, where they're still counting but is leading, right? Not by a lot, but is still leading. Lee Zeldin in New York. New York usually goes blue by like 100,000 million points, right? Lee Zeldin lost, fair, but by 5 points, bringing in 4 seats behind him, 4 House of Representatives seats. Basically, New York and Florida single-handedly gave Republicans control of the House of Representatives, and New Jersey in the one
Barely.
district that switched.
Yeah.
Like those states single-handedly did it.
Well, and I'll be
It's
honest with you, that as Republican leadership should frankly scare the hell out of you that you're
yes,
relying on conservative, not, let me put it to you this way, reliably swing and democratic states, and that's where you're pulling your seats from, and that's how you're sort of grasping the thin straws of power that you're going to hold now. If I'm Republican
yeah,
leadership, if I'm Kevin McCarthy, I am panicking today.
yeah.
I have
Well,
no
that's because
idea
Kevin
what my
McCarthy
party's doing.
shouldn't be the Speaker of the House, right? He failed.
Well,
If you look
he's
at Republican leadership, they're trying to spin this as like a super successful win. Are you kidding?
oh my, blows my
Like,
mind.
sure,
Absolutely blows my mind.
it's not a catastrophic loss, right? Because you did get the House, fine, but this isn't a win.
No, not even a little bit. And
It's
I
a draw.
saw barely, so draw
Yeah.
barely. I um I had posted it to my personal Instagram, and it was this TikTok, and I want to get the commentator's name. Hold on, because he was a conservative commentator, and to me it was like very striking. Mark Thiessen, and he says, I'll read it as I'm going through. He is the worst inflation in 4 decades, the worst collapse in real wages in 40 years, the worst crime wave since the 90s, the worst border crisis in U.S. history. Joe Biden, who's the least popular president since Harry Truman, and there wasn't a red wave. He says it's a searing indictment of the Republican Party, of the messages that they've been sending to voters. Voters looked at all of those facts and then at what the Republicans were proposing on their platforms and said, no, thank you. We're going to stick with Democrats. Even as somebody who sits on the left and voted Democrat in this election, blows my mind that you have Republicans, people who lean conservative, that your party, you guys' party, should have been able to turn out in the face of what this man said. All these things are facts: highest inflation, decrease in real wages, a border crisis, all of these things. If that's not enough to motivate your base, I don't know what is.
So this is where I disagree with him and why I say it's not necessarily a rebuke on the messaging per se. It's a rebuke on just bad candidates. Like you're running bad candidates in in known close races, right? Dr. Oz, Doug Mastriano, Herschel Walker, JD Vance, Blake Masters, Bolduc, these are not great candidates and they're in tough races where you have the best candidates, where the Republicans put up the best candidates, they won. They won walking away with it. My thing is that I don't think anybody went out there and voted because they really supported the Democratic Party. And the reason I say that is because of the ballot splitting. In the same race that Herschel Walker barely eked out a runoff election, Brian Kemp won by like 5% of the vote. In the same race
Well,
that JD Vance barely won in Ohio, Mike DeWine won by 400,000 votes.
so let's poke at that a tiny bit, to whom would you compare the ideas and values of, let's say, a Herschel Walker as opposed to Brian Kemp? I think that's your
I
split
no,
right there.
right,
Herschel
no,
Walker is
exactly.
a clear Trump Republican
Right,
through and through, and in every possible way, and Brian Kemp, quite frankly, is not.
right. That's exactly
So,
it. It
again,
all leads back to the person who is in charge of the Republican Party, whether we like it or not, and that is Donald Trump. Donald Trump is the leader of the Republican Party. Sure, Kevin McCarthy, sure, Elaine Stefanik, but Donald Trump is the leader of the party. And if you look at
it's
the
a scary
Trump
place to be.
candidates, well, if you look at the Trump candidates, you see losers or barely winners. And if you look at the candidates that distance themselves from Donald Trump, you see not only winners, but complete outperformers and complete destruction of the Democrats running against them. And I think it's quite clear. And so now you look forward, right? Because 2022 happened, the election is over, right? You have your winners in most places, you know who won, you know who lost. And you look forward to 2024 where you have look, look, Joe Biden, if they performed poorly in this midterm, Joe Biden would not be the 2024 nominee. I think we all know that. He still
Mhm.
might not be. But he comes out and he takes this victory lap, or I mean, you can't really run a lap, so like this victory sleepwalk, and he says, I'm 100% running in 2024. Watch me. Basically, the reporter asked him, like, there's a lot of people that really don't want you to run. How do you feel about that? And he said, watch me. Okay. So they're giving you a gift on a silver platter. And and still, Donald Trump says he has this big announcement on Tuesday. The biggest announcement in the history of our country, I think was the exact words. So Donald Trump is running for president in 2024. He's already attacking Ron DeSantis because that's clearly his biggest threat right now. And he is
Um,
preemptively attacking Ron DeSantis, the man who just flipped Florida red and won by 20 points. Okay, preemptively going after him because he's scared. Now, the only Republican genuinely that I think could lose in 2024 against Joe Biden is Donald Trump. The only legitimate I should say, the only at this point legitimate Republican candidate, right? You look at anybody whose name was floated out there, I think they beat Joe Biden. I think Nikki Haley beats Joe Biden. Tim Scott beats Joe Biden. Ron DeSantis beats Joe Biden. Rand Paul beats Joe Biden. Like you name them, they probably beat Joe Biden. Donald Trump doesn't because people don't like Donald Trump. Independents don't like Donald Trump. This doesn't win you any favors in a Republican base. I understand that. I've gotten into plenty of arguments, plenty of discussions about this. Donald Trump is not liked by the people who sway elections. Sure, you could get 100% of Republicans to go out and vote for Donald Trump, which you won't, but you could. You'd lose. Women don't like Donald Trump. Independents don't like Donald Trump. Democrats really don't like Donald Trump. It's
Go
ridiculous. No, I'm done.
I I was frantically searching uh, on Tuesday night for my popcorn because I was watching the modern Republican Party just completely fracture and split right before my eyes, and it was tremendous because I don't know that I trust anybody in that party to make the right decision and make sure that they do everything they can to make sure Donald Trump is not on the ballot in 2024 because you look at the people who get the most money, grassroots money, and guess where that grassroots money is? In candidates like Marjorie Taylor Greene, who are the hardest of the Trump supporters.
You know what the worst part about Donald Trump? You just mentioned money. The worst part about Donald Trump leading the party, no, he doesn't
Hmm.
give any money to anybody else.
Yeah.
He hoards it all. And then he
Hmm.
blames Mitch McConnell and his Senate PAC, which started funding all of the Republican Senate races,
Yeah. Listen,
as
man.
as like it's their fault, not mine. Please.
Listen. Listen. He is accidentally a good politician when it comes down to the nitty gritty of politics and these hard decisions and the things that matter, like where you put your money. as a candidate and as a supporter of the Republican Party, right? And you're privy to these conversations. He does nothing in support of the actual party. It is all me, 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 me. I could have told you that 4 years ago,
Yeah.
right? So now you put this guy who thinks he was cheated out of a presidency in a position where he has people who he aligned himself with, who he endorsed, that won. He strikes me as the kind of guy that it could be the darkest tunnel ahead of him, and somebody has to just flick a lighter at the end of it and be like, "Nope, there's light down there. We're gonna go for it." And I think that the Republican Party is gonna have a really hard 2 years. I don't think that even with just in terms of practicality of governance, before we even talk about an election, I don't know that you're going to be able to see the Republican caucus in the House of Representatives, if they have this very, very slim majority as it is, do any productive governance because what is their messaging going to be?
Oh, we're not gonna do any productive governance either way, right? You're okay,
But
again, and you always say this to me, like, you're asking too much of anybody that's in that
yeah,
position to do anything,
yeah,
right?
yeah,
And their whole point, like, their whole big thing is that you won the House, you can obstruct.
that's about it.
That's what they're gonna do for the next and maybe if that, because if it's a slim majority, Democrats are going to get some Republicans to come to their side on certain issues,
100%.
and so you're going to be giving Joe Biden wins.
100%. And I think that's a mistake though, because I also think that there is a legitimate part of the Democratic Party that sees how hopeless of a candidate in 2024 Joe Biden is. So it almost this is going to seem counterintuitive, but I think that if you're a Democrat and you're smart, you need to be picking and choosing what wins you attribute to this president because he is not a viable candidate if anybody other than Donald Trump is on the Republican ticket. I agree with you on that 100%. And we almost kind of have to do on the left this sort of like damage control and very very carefully decide what we are going to allow Joe Biden to claim as a win. I know the one thing that he promised very, very publicly, if the midterms went well for Democrats, was we're going to codify Roe, into law and basically made abortion a big voting issue for this midterm, which I mean, obviously worked. They turned out tremendous amounts of people who voted on the issue.
Yeah, I mean, it worked kind of. Like, I can't even say that it worked. I don't know if I necessarily agree with that analysis because if you look at, again, the places that the Republicans were able to distance themselves from Trump, they were able to run on inflation and win. Like, look at Tom Keene. Tom Keene didn't present himself as a pro-choice candidate, right? He just presented himself as not the Democrat, as a budget hawk, and he won. I mean,
Yeah,
redistricting helped, but
but here's the other thing. Here's the other thing, right? How long can Republicans ride the inflation train when we just had news today that the Fed hike is working and we're actually
yeah,
seeing inflation go down. You know what I mean?
you're seeing
And
inflation go
that's
down, but you're seeing other things go up as a result of inflation. And gas prices are gonna go skyrocketing because guess what? The midterms happened, and we just used our oil reserves to
yeah,
get us to the midterm so that gas prices weren't so high. So there's gonna be
yeah.
other things. Like, our economy is in shambles still, I promise you, just
I
because inflation might be going down.
I know that. I'm curious to see how long these because I feel like everything, I mean, as is the case with politics, you and I can both attest to this, especially in an election year, not everything is as it seems. And we said weeks ago that the things that Joe Biden were doing were basically, midterm collateral coverage. We're going to release these oil reserves. We're going to make this big stink about codifying Roe. We're going to do the college, tuition um, forgiveness. Like we're going to do all these things to coast our way to the midterm. Maybe hold on to a majority in the Senate. It's looking that way. We're going to lose the House. That's fine. But these are all temporary solutions to very long term problems. And I don't think that either party has a really good answer. I think that, we're looking too far ahead of us. Granted, it's situational, but we're looking too far ahead at 2024 and we're kind of just trying to skate by until we it's election season and we have nominees and then we can start talking about real solutions to these issues And my problem with that is the American people do not want to wait another 2 years for solutions to issues with things regarding reproductive rights, inflation, gas prices, the border issues. Like, these are not things that the American people want to kind of be spoon fed these little, oh, here's a tidbit of, hope. Hold on, hold on. Joe Biden's going to be there to save you in 2 years, or
Yeah.
Ron DeSantis or Donald Trump's going to be there to save you in 2 years. That's not the answer. That's not how we play this game. I
No,
think that these midterms, well, it
it
is how
is
we
how
play the
we
game.
play this game.
It is. It is. Yeah. Let me jump back on that. That is exactly how the game is played. Um, I'm just really, really curious to see. I'm curious to see a few things after the midterms. I want to see how Georgia goes. That's going to be December 6th, and I think that is the one that's really going to decide power in the Senate. That's
Unless
like,
Nevada and Arizona go red, which we still don't have the full vote on,
yes,
which it
yeah.
looks like Nevada I'd say Nevada probably will at this point, Arizona probably won't, and then you're looking
It's
at
it's literally
it's
Georgia.
gonna be Georgia, and it would be 50-50 again. No, it would be 51-49,
Yep,
if Arizona stays blue. Yeah, it would be 51-49.
yep. Which, again, this is something that I was saying back when you and I were covering elections at Montclair, that Georgia is the new Florida. Like, that is the
Yeah.
spot, right? So this is a race we're going to have to watch point blank. I want to find out what happens in Georgia. The other thing that I want to look at is Kevin McCarthy really going to be able to get the votes to be Speaker of the House again?
I
Right? I don't know.
I don't see how you do. I don't see how you can walk away from this midterm and say I should be Speaker of the House. Now, I don't know who should be Speaker of the House. Don't get me wrong. I don't have any ideas really that come to mind that I think could coalesce effectively both factions of the party. Um, because I mean, if I had my hand-picked person, House of Representatives candidate, it would be Dan Crenshaw, and Trumpers don't like Dan Crenshaw,
Yeah,
right? So, so I don't know who can kind of coalesce the party to be the Speaker of the House. Um, so I don't think Kevin McCarthy should be, but it
right.
probably will wind up being that way. Just
So
like I'm sure you don't want Nancy Pelosi to be the minority leader, but she's going to be.
yeah, well, we're not even gonna scrape the surface on that. Um, I'm also curious to see, because obviously this is, the cycle that we're in. I want to know whomever, the House of Representatives, Speaker of the House is, what kind of investigations they're gonna, decide are pertinent and need to be launched into the president. I mean, because that's that. Like I said, that's just the game that we play. Do I agree with it when either party does it? No,
Yeah, no, the
but
first two are going to be Hunter Biden and Dr. Fauci's. Like those are going to be the
yeah,
first two.
that's what I mean. So I'm curious to see what that does in terms of like public reaction to those investigations, how they operate, what their outcomes are, because they're undoubtedly going to happen. That's just how this, caucus is going to move once they're in power. So I'm curious to see what that does. That could throw a wrench entirely into everything that we've just said about, 2024 prospects. So I think that'll be interesting. And then, more importantly, like I said from the jump, I want to find out sooner than later where Republicans are going to hedge their bets in 2024, because that work starts the minute that we know the power balance in Congress. Does Donald Trump come out on Tuesday with, if you want my opinion, I think the greatest political announcement in the history of our country would be him saying, "I'm not running for president." And if he cared about the Republican Party and Republican values, he would do that, and he would kind of gracefully allow this transition towards the Ron DeSantis Republicans. Because I'll tell you what, as somebody who has voted reliably blue for the entirety of my voting life,
Except for when Bob Menendez is on the ticket.
unless Bob Menendez is on the ticket because he's a crook and he should be in jail, um, I would vote for Ron DeSantis. If it was DeSantis Biden, I am taking Ron DeSantis every single day of the week. And I think that there are a lot of very moderate Democrats who feel the same way. Joe Biden, as much as I'm going to sit here and defend his, I'll say, theoretical goals, right? Like the things that he stands for,
The things
he's
that he
about
is getting propped up standing in front of a microphone and camera for.
he's about as inept as they come. And I mean, listen, the guy before him wasn't much better, right? So we're, as far as I'm concerned, it's like we're two strikes, we are down, down and out essentially, and we need like our third hitter to come up in 2024 and at least get a guy on first. You know what I mean? Like we are down and out as it is, and
Yeah,
I
I
think
wouldn't say that we're in the bottom of the ninth as a country, but we might be in the
no,
bottom of the seventh or eighth.
yeah, no, it's getting pretty close. We're getting pretty close. Because, and this is something I kind of wanted your take on, a lot of Democratic messaging at the highest levels of this, right, was that democracy itself is at stake. I'm curious as to your sort of reaction to that, if that's something that you think people seriously went to the polls and voted on that issue of saving, democracy. We're going to save democracy by voting Democrat. And if that's a viable message for voters moving into a general election.
No, I
Because
don't think it's
I
the
think it's just as dangerous as what happened the last time where we're calling elections, illegitimate. I think that both of those things are dangerous in the same way, just in different iterations.
I think that that's fair. And no, I don't think that it was effective messaging. I think that genuinely, I think that if somebody looked at a candidate and just said, I don't like them or I don't trust them, they voted against them, right? It's not or that person's crazy. Simple as that, right? That person is crazy. Okay, just some example. Herschel Walker. Okay, Herschel Walker is crazy.
Yes.
He has a million illegitimate children apparently. He has forced a bunch of abortions, which I'm sure people on the right will attack me for saying this, but these are the allegations against him. And the people of Georgia look at that and they say that guy is nutty. He says nutty things. Okay? You have a Pennsylvania governor's candidate who was literally pictured at January 6th. If you don't think January 6th is a problem, fine, but independent voters do. You have Blake Masters in a purple state who, on his campaign website, said that he thinks that all abortion 100% should be illegal and prosecuted. Okay, so that might win you votes in super, super red Alabama. That doesn't win you votes in purple Arizona. Okay, so my my thing is, if people thought that the other person was crazy, they voted for the person that was the most sane seeming. I don't think it had anything to do with
That's
a threat
crazy.
to democracy or anything to do with anything other than that guy's nuts or that woman's nuts, and I'm going to vote for the more sane person in the closer races, in the races that we knew were going to be close going in.
But that to me is a crazy place for politics to be at. And
Yeah,
the way that Democrats weaponize that is a guy like I forget who you said was the one that was calling for the all out abortion ban and
Blake
prosecution.
Masters.
Blake Masters, right? It's so easy for whomever the Democrat running against him is to say, look, here's another guy that wants to take away your fundamental reproductive rights. That is
You're
a threat
running
to democracy.
you're running against Mark Kelly in Arizona. Mark Kelly is about as like milk toast Democrat as you can get. Like not
I
super left, former astronaut, took John McCain's seat. You know what he did? He just walked around Arizona and was shaking hands with every single Republican mayor in the state, winning endorsements from Republican mayors in the state of Arizona because it was so easy for him to turn around and say, this guy is crazy. Do I personally think that Blake Masters is crazy? No. Do I think that there was a lot on his platform that I fundamentally agree with? But when you are going to run in a state like Arizona or a state like New Jersey or a state like Pennsylvania or any purple state in the country and some red states, you can't run on an extreme position on abortion. And
You
I don't
can't.
necessarily agree with Blake Masters' position on abortion, right? I'm not an extreme to that extent. That's why you lost this race. Period. That and your allegiance to Donald Trump, like your strong allegiance to Donald Trump.
Well, I also think that's another dynamic of this, right? Is again, you have a party that is suffering with, are we committed to X, Y, and Z ideals, or this person and what this person, you know, believes the Republican platform is. I don't think Republicans have a solid footing. And I think because of that, simply because of the position that Democrats occupy, holding, the executive and, right now, one branch of Congress, it's so easy for them to, abuse that lack of clear messaging on Republicans' ends and say, look, these people can't even figure out what they want to do with themselves. You're going to trust them to make decisions for everybody?
It's so easy for the Republicans, though. It is so easy, right? What do you run on? You run on tightening up the border. You run on fixing the economy through things like every Republican ever has run on, right? Lowering taxes for people, making the burdens easier on people, the individual burden easier on people. You run on something like, I mean, I think that tariffs, which is one Donald Trump thing that he reintroduced to the Republican Party, is fine. I'm pro tariff myself. I'm not a super like free trade person. I think that there are ways to
As
incorporate
long as the
some.
tariffs don't start trade wars with China, then I think we'll be good.
I think that um, some of the Trump era policies are things that you can add to the Republican ticket, right? I don't think that criminal justice reform is the worst thing to add to your ticket right now in today's political climate. And I think that you run on drilling oil, which the Democratic Party has run completely against in a time where we need oil, right? Like I think you run on these areas of that are just right there in front of you and you win. If you look at somebody like Ron DeSantis, who is just the clearest example of what I would imagine would be taking both sides of the Republican Party and sort of using them together, because he does do a lot of very Trump era things, right? He is a very Trump style politician, but he's not Donald Trump.
Of course.
He's good, he's seasoned. He knows when to say and how to say it, right? And his policies are conservative, yeah, but they're much more thought out. They're not gut. It seems like Donald Trump ran by the seat of his pants, right? Right? That's the saying.
Yes, yes.
um and you need somebody at the top of your party who is calculated, right? Barack Obama was calculated. I think that he is a reason why the Democrats lost in 2016 and got demolished in 2010 and almost lost in 2012 was his narcissistic tendencies. The same reason that the Republicans are losing now because of Donald Trump, right?
Correct.
Because Barack Obama thought he was the greatest thing to ever happen to the history of the world, and I still think he does think that. But he was calculated at the very least, and he thought his decisions out.
I just can't. I don't know. I can sit here, you know, and get on here every Wednesday or Thursday when we record, and from my bedroom in my childhood home, be able to tell you what is probably the best thing for Republicans to do on a national level, right? If I can come up with better messaging than the people that you have doing your messaging right now, you need to figure something out in the next 2 years, plain and simple, because this, by every possible, sorry, this by every possible account, every prediction, should have been a walk away election for Republicans. We should not be having a runoff in December. We should not be having these races in Arizona and Nevada that are this close. And the Republicans, because of Donald Trump and the way that he was allowed to carry himself and sort of skate by these really big like rhetoric issues that he had, you are now kind of sitting here like a chicken with your head cut off, running around, scrapping for life at this point, essentially, because if this majority in the House is as close as it looks like it's going to be, I and I know I said this earlier. I know Republicans wouldn't do much governance even if they had a majority, but when the majority is this slim, I know for a fact they're not going to do next to any governance. And
Well,
you're
they
giving
can't
Joe
do
Biden and the Democrats another 2 years essentially to do what they want.
well, they can try to do what they want, and I don't think anything is going to get like, nothing, right? It's going to be complete obstruction. Nothing's going to happen because if at least if the Republicans took the Senate, there was a possibility that you had, a 1994 Bill Clinton moment out of Joe Biden where you turn around and you say, "I will listen to the American people." The American people rebuked what we were trying to put out there. They want something different. The era of big government is over type of thing out of Bill Clinton in 94, right? But you don't get that. You get exactly what the worst possible scenario could be. You have a Republican Party who is there to obstruct in the House, and you have a Democratic Party that feels emboldened to try and do things. And the amount of infighting and the amount of just absolutely nothing that will get done for the next 2 years is going to be probably unbearable.
But
And
let me
that's why
ask you this
everybody's
then.
looking at 2024.
Well, let me ask you this then. If that's the case, how does a Republican win? Because then the retort is very easy. You guys scraped power, and all you could do is obstruct. And, the Democrats had X, Y, and Z win. Let's say we bring inflation down, we codify Roe, we did, student loan forgiveness. We made good on our promises, even despite you guys winning. What reason would any American have when they enter the ballot box in 2024 to vote for a Republican?
Well, that's if they do those things that you said, right? Like, I
Well,
just don't think they will. Like, Roe
I
isn't,
mean,
I don't
some
think,
of them
getting
are done.
codified.
Some of them are done.
Well, the student loan forgiveness is being challenged in courts. So we'll see, because that was done by executive action, and there were questions around it, right? That wasn't congressionally done. So we'll see if that one goes through. Inflation is going down, but that, like I said, that doesn't mean the economy is going up, right? Like, we are headed into a global recession. No doubt about it. There's no getting up from it at this point. We're there. There's a war going on in Ukraine still, right? These issues are still there, and I don't think that they're going to be resolved before, unfortunately, before the 2024 election. Most of them, if they do get resolved and things are rosy in 2024, then yeah, no, Republicans probably don't win. But I just don't think that will be the case.
So
And if
let me
that's
ask
the
you
case,
this.
then Republicans are running on culture issues. They're
But
running
do
on they're running on, transgenderism and education and things like that. The immigration. At this point, right, you have an easy path to victory if you can run on what you should have been able to run on in the midterms, if that stuff holds, right? The economy is no good. We should be drilling for oil and we're not. We have an immigration crisis. Um, you know, and then certain cultural issues that make their way in there, the education issue, the fact that we're behind in education because Democrats closed the country down for 2 years, right? So how long can you throw that out there? How long is that going to play? The Democrats closed us down and shut us down and took away everything during 2020 and 2021. Like, does that play all the way to 2024? I don't know.
I don't think so.
Probably not.
I don't think so.
People probably move on.
I don't think it plays now.
Well, I think it does. I think that there's a big reason why people did vote with their feet too, right? They moved.
Yeah,
They moved to
yeah, yeah.
Florida. They moved to Texas. So I think that it did play, right? Why is Ron DeSantis so popular?
I think
Because of it leads it all leads back to that.
it does. It does. But I don't see that as having an issue having lasting power. Like
Yeah,
point
no, I
blank.
don't
I
I don't
think
think it does either. You know, I think that, they investigate Fauci, and it's found out that he lied about the Wuhan funding of gain of function research. Okay, fine, and you slap him on the wrist or do whatever you do, and then that kind of ends.
Yeah. I'm really I, I would say that my biggest takeaway from the midterms, like I said, we have to see what happens in Georgia. Number one, before there's any like actual serious conversation about what legislatively this country is going to be doing for the next 2 years. My biggest takeaway is that this country has some soul searching to do as an entirety. Like every single one of us, we have to figure out. Democrats need to intermingle with Democrats and figure out how we are going to scramble together, and if Joe Biden is the candidate, make that man palatable, because that's the best he could be, is palatable. um Republicans need to decide who they're going to hedge their bets on, what ideologies are important, and what values they're going to promote and what they're going to condemn, what behaviors they're going to promote and condemn. And then as a country, we need to decide what are the issues that are important to us, right? Because we can sit here and we could talk about the economy, we could talk about the border, and then you also mentioned there are international crises happening. There is a war happening, across the ocean that we are spending a lot of money on. How is that affecting us? Next week, I think will be really interesting. Joe Biden is going to have his first face-to-face meeting with Xi Jinping in China. And granted, this is a bit of an extrapolation, but we're letting Russia get away rather easily for, storming into sovereign territory that they believe is theirs and murdering, at this point, probably millions of people in totality to take it. And you'd be foolish to think that China doesn't follow suit in the next few years with Taiwan, right? So we have a lot of foreign issues to worry about as well. Midterms, I know, always tend to be centric on domestic issues. That's fine. But like I said, as a country, we have to realize also, and I think this is the one sort of like glistening little glimmer of hope that I have out of the midterms, is that it was supposed to be a red wave and it wasn't, which means that I don't believe we are really, when it comes down to it, as divided as we are led to believe. And this is something that you raised the issue of with this split ticket voting, right? If we can say, you know what, we like some of the Democrats, we like some of the Republicans, and that number is so close, it means that we are nearing a middle ground of a country as what we want to promote and what we want to condemn, and issues that we find important. We have a lot of work to do over the next 2 years to figure that out and have a clear vision moving forward into 2024, so we can get candidates that are passionate and have good policies on the issues that American people, not Democrats and Republicans, American people find to be important and worth the investment of 4 years of somebody's term, working to solve them. That's the point that we are at. And I think the glistening hope, like I said, is that we are not as divided as it seems.
Yeah, I think that there's a lot there that you said that's completely fair. Um, I don't think that Russia's necessarily gotten away. They've gotten away on a maybe international stage more than they should have, but I mean they took massive losses in that in their attempt to take over Ukraine, and I think that Putin has taken massive popularity losses as well. Uh,
What does
he doesn't
popularity
care.
matter in
Yeah,
Russia?
you're right. And I think that you actually hit the nail on the head, and it's something I should have said when you asked about what will Republicans run on in 2024 if somehow the Democrats can come through on their promises and make rosy on sort of social and domestic issues. Foreign policy. I think that the Biden administration's foreign policy is a train wreck, and it's very, very easy because it
What
doesn't
foreign
exist. It's
policy?
non-existent. Exactly. It's a train wreck. Um, like Donald Trump at least had foreign policy achievements to run on in 2020, right? There was no new wars. There was seeming Middle Eastern peace agreements that were striking up, right? There's nothing now. If anything, it's just gotten completely worse. Um, so that's a big thing that they can run on in 2024 too. But I would say ultimately, I think you're right. Um, the country is probably not as divided as we are led to believe, and the country is probably a lot more like just looking around and saying, "Can somebody that's not an absolute psychopath run for office in our country? Like somebody that's just not crazy or senile do something in our country."
Well,
Um,
you know when it's really important to remember those thoughts and feelings?
in the primaries.
In the primary elections. I think I've said it every dang episode of this show, and I will say it every episode to come of this show. When it is time to vote in a primary, know whether your state has open or closed primaries, register accordingly, and be prepared to be a part of the primary vote is like the most important vote because it determines who is on the ballot in the general election. And we cannot, for the love of God, we cannot continue this. I feel like American voters are masochists, right? Like it's just cyclical. We're like, we hate good candidates. We love having bad candidates and complaining about elections. It's fun banter with your friends and acquaintances. The worst of two evils, huh? Like I'm
The
over it.
water
It's
cooler talk.
yeah, it's I'm over it because that's
Oh
not how
God.
politics should be.
Oh God, I really wish that we had somebody that had a little bit of sense to run our country.
Yeah, yeah. You know when we do that in the primaries, I'm tired of pretending like it's not an issue that we need better voter turnout in primaries and we need to educate the population more about the importance of primaries because everything that we just spoke about could be completely turned on its head if people show up in a primary election and rebuke Joe Biden and put another Democrat as the nominee. Or if people rebuke, let's say Donald Trump runs, rebuke him and put in Ron DeSantis. Or if Ron DeSantis, blunders in the next 2 years, you vote for somebody to represent you that you want to represent you. It
And
is that simple.
and even bigger than that, not just your president, like know who's running in your House of Representatives primary, in your
Case in
Senate
point.
primary, right? Like know those people too. Just know who you're
Case
voting for.
case and point, and I'm happy you mentioned this. When I showed up to my voting place, my polling location, right over there, like 3 blocks that way, I was fully under the impression, you guys watch me. I do this every week. I love politics. I This is what I do. I'm very informed. I have nice opinions, I like to think. I was fully under the impression walking into that booth. I walked in, signed, got my little slip, handed it to the nice old woman, stepped in the booth, was ready to press Andy Kim because I am a huge fan of Andy Kim, Democrat, New Jersey 3rd District, been voting here my whole life. And I see two names on the ballot that I've never seen before because I am no longer in New Jersey's 3rd District. We were redistricted. How is it that somebody who has quite literally been paying attention to the midterm elections, was unaware that I was redistricted? You want to talk about a problem? How many other people suffered the same fate and were shocked when they stepped in the ballot box? And you're not going to be the person to whip out your phone in the ballot box, do a quick Google on the 5 candidates that you have to choose from, right? Like that's just not what you're going to do. So, yeah, I don't know. That's just an anecdote that I wanted to share. I was very frustrated. I was totally under the impression that I'd be represented by Andy Kim. Rather, I'm now represented by Chris Smith, who is, you ready for this? The second longest serving member of the House of Representatives, Republican, since 1981. 1981.
Yeah,
This
I
man
mean,
has been serving for like 42 years, 41 years.
Yep.
Get
Chris
out.
Smith.
Get out. You're doing it too long. Career politician? Ugh. I want nothing to do with that.
But
Republican or Democrat, I want nothing to do with that.
yeah, I mean, New Jersey completely redistricted, basically made the red districts redder, the blue districts bluer, and it came at the expense of Tom Malinowski and NJ Seventh, who lost to Tom Keene Jr. Um, and they knew that going in. They were basically like, "Hey, you're our weakest link. Goodbye."
Yep.
What show was that? You are the weakest link. Goodbye. I don't remember, but one
I
of
know
those
what you're
reality
talking
shows.
about. Yeah.
So yeah, I mean, redistricting is a whole other host of problems. You're not given nearly enough information on who does it, why they do it, how they do it, and that it's happening. I think that I'm sure a lot of people suffer the same fates. Um, just as a whole, I think the biggest thing is accountability of knowing who you are voting for and why you're voting for them. And when you sit there and you're going to look at who will be in the general election, know that you have an opinion on the matter of who will be in the general election through voting in the primary. And instead of going to that primary booth and saying, you know, I'm a Republican and I am going to vote for simply the most rock ribbed conservative on this ballot. Know that you live in, I don't know that you live in New Jersey and the most rock ribbed conservative is probably going to lose. Know that you live in Pennsylvania and the guy that was pictured at the Capitol on January 6th isn't going to be the governor of your state, whether you want him to or not. Know that going in. Say, this person has some baggage. He's not going to win. Maybe I should vote for her because she might be a little less conservative, but guess what? I live in a bluer purple place, so I'm going to have to deal with it. I'd rather it's a perceived sane person have a chance of winning.
I
It's not that hard of a rationalization to make.
listen, man. Listen. As we get further into these issues, right? And this is something that I know you and I talked a lot about last week. Um and even just the principle at hand here is, why is it so difficult for the people who in this system are supposed to be fairly represented in our government to make decisions? We're putting people to make decisions on behalf of us for what we believe to be, the best policy solutions, right? Why is it so hard, unless you dedicate, serious amounts of time and effort and energy and knowledge and learning terminology and all these procedural things? Why is it so hard to get information about these things that quite literally affect your day-to-day life? That's a problem. That's a huge problem. Why did we stop teaching civics in high school? Right? Right? Why? And you know what? I'll be honest with you. I think if more people knew, you wouldn't have a guy like Chris Smith who's able to hold a position for 41 years, right? Like you just wouldn't have that. I think our government was designed to be, with all these frequent elections, in and out, new ideas. We're always testing, we're always trying, we're always crafting, we're always pushing forward in some way. Why is it so hard to get information on that? Why do people not understand the importance of a primary vote? Why did I have to walk into a voting booth on election day to find out that I was redistricted? That's a problem. We could talk about the midterms, we could talk about the issues. What it boils down to is access to information, whether it be about processes, about candidates, about results. It feels like it is purposefully hard to obtain this really important information.
Sure, it should be really easy to mail every voter that and say that the district's changed right when you did it. It should be really easy to teach kids in high school how the system works, in middle school and elementary school, but that's not required in the state of New Jersey to be taught. Or if it's suggested in the state of New Jersey and there's no actual curriculum requirement for it, right? There's there are some systematic and issues that you sort of are making uninformed, unintelligent voters. And a more conspiratorial mind than myself would tell you that it's on purpose. Um, I don't necessarily think it's on purpose. I think that it's a lot more just people being incompetent and bad at their jobs,
Yeah.
um, and then malicious and wanting to keep the voter base stupid. Um, but overall, we're running out of time, so I think just one last thing is know who you're voting for, vote in primary elections, do your research because somebody has to, and look at anything available to you research wise. Um, and with that, also know that when you are looking at a candidate in a primary, that person is going to represent your party in the general election. And if you don't want your party to be looked at as crazy people, don't elect crazy people. Because I can promise you that there are people that think that Alexandria Ocasio Cortez is the entirety of the Democratic Party, and there are people that think that Marjorie Taylor Greene is the entirety of the Republican Party because those are the people that are going to get the plays because those are the people that are a bit nutty. So don't elect nutty people, and you won't have the cooler problem of I just wish that we could pick between two not terrible candidates.
Couldn't have said it better myself.
So with that, this was another episode of Bridging the Gap on the Jersey First TV network. I am AJ Malillo.
I am Stephen Romola.
And who knows, maybe next week we will be able to break down the most important speech in the history of our country, as Donald Trump has some sort of speech planned out for Tuesday. So enjoy the weekend, everybody, and we will catch you next week.